Clara Bennett's heels clicked sharply against the wet pavement, the sound swallowed by the fog curling through the quiet streets of Hawthorne. Most people would have called it a peaceful evening, but Clara didn't feel peace. Something about the ledger she had discovered earlier that day refused to let her relax. Its pages were filled with meticulous, almost obsessive details, transactions, dates, names that didn't belong in polite society, names that could ruin lives if exposed. For weeks, Clara had been investigating a series of deaths labeled as accidents. One businessman fell from a rooftop, another drowned in what appeared to be a boating mishap, and a third died in a suspicious car crash. The authorities had dismissed each as unfortunate but unrelated. Clara wasn't so sure. Her instincts told her the pattern was deliberate, calculated, and dangerous, and now the ledger confirmed her fears. She ducked into a small cafe, the smell of coffee and baked bread momentarily grounding her in normalcy. Settling at a corner table, she spread the ledger out in front of her, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. Every transaction told a story. Some were coded payments, others were property acquisitions with hidden beneficiaries, and a few hinted at more sinister deeds, untraceable consultations, shell companies, and strange abbreviations Clara hadn't seen before. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text. "Don't look too deep. They're watching." Clara froze. She glanced around the cafe. The place was nearly empty, except for a barista wiping down counters and a couple of late-night patrons staring at their laptops. Nothing overtly threatening, and yet the message chilled her. It wasn't the first. In recent days, she had found her tires slashed, a broken lock on her apartment door, and a shadowy figure she had glimpsed twice near her building. Someone was following her. Someone wanted her to stop. She typed back carefully, "I'm not stopping." The reply came almost instantly. "Then be careful, very careful." Clara knew that if she kept pursuing this story, she was risking everything, her safety, her career, even her life. But for a journalist, the truth wasn't negotiable, and Clara had always been nothing if not relentless. By midnight, the cafe had emptied, and the streets were slick with rain. Clara made her way to the small apartment she rented on the outskirts of town. It was modest, cluttered with files, notebooks, and a scattering of half-empty coffee mugs, but it was hers, a sanctuary from the outside world, or at least it had been. Inside, she booted up her laptop, cross-referencing the ledger with news reports, corporate filings, and public records. Hours passed. Her eyes burned from fatigue, but she barely noticed. Every detail, every discrepancy added another layer to the story forming in her mind. Then a faint noise, a soft click from her apartment door. She froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Nothing else. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. Clara's pulse quickened. She grabbed the small flashlight she kept in her drawer and crept toward the door. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing, just the dimly lit hallway of her building. Whoever it had been was gone, or maybe hadn't been there at all. But the warning messages and strange incidents weren't coincidental. Someone was watching. Someone knew. She called Marcus Hayes, her only confidant. Marcus, a former detective, had retired a few years back, but Clara trusted him implicitly. His calm, analytical mind balanced her impulsive nature. "Marcus," she whispered when he answered, "I think I'm in trouble. I found something big. People will kill to keep it secret." There was a pause on the other end. Then, in his measured tone, "I'll help, but we need to be smart about this. Don't go anywhere alone tonight." Clara promised she wouldn't, but as she hung up, the feeling of unease grew heavier. She could sense eyes on her, though she couldn't see them. Every shadow in her apartment seemed elongated, waiting. Hours later, unable to sleep, Clara returned to the ledger. She highlighted a name she had almost missed, Lawrence Grayson, a respected businessman with political connections. According to the ledger, Grayson had paid multiple off-the-books consultations to various intermediaries, each coinciding with a suspicious death. Her mind raced. If she could prove the connection between Grayson and the deaths, the story could blow the lid off corruption that reached far beyond Hawthorne. But proving it would be dangerous, and yet she had to try. She jotted down notes, her pen scratching frantically against paper. Every observation felt like a thread leading into a darker, more intricate web. And somewhere in that web, someone had noticed her curiosity. As the night deepened, Clara's laptop pinged with an email alert. No sender, no subject, just a single line. Stop now or disappear like the rest. A chill ran down her spine. She closed the laptop and backed away, her heart racing. The threats weren't idle, they were real. And then, as she tried to steady her breathing, she heard it again, the faint sound of footsteps outside her door, slow and deliberate. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but where could she go? Every exit was monitored, every street potentially watched. Clara grabbed her bag, throwing in the ledger, her laptop, and a few essentials. She needed to meet Marcus. He could help her figure out her next move. She opened the door slowly, peeking into the hallway. Empty, yet the sense of being followed intensified, a weight pressing down on her chest. By the time she reached her car, she felt eyes burning in her back. She refused to look, starting the engine and pulling into the dark, empty streets. Every turn, every shadow seemed alive. She couldn't shake the feeling that her every move had been anticipated. Finally, at the edge of town, she called Marcus again. "I'm on my way," she said, voice tight with fear. "Meet me at the old warehouse near the docks. I have something you need to see." Marcus hesitated. "Clara, it's dangerous out there. If they're watching—" "I know," she interrupted, "but I don't have a choice." Clara hung up, driving into the fog, unaware of the black SUV that had been tailing her for the past hour, its driver silent and patient. Somewhere deep in the shadows, someone was making plans, waiting for the moment to strike. The night was thick with tension, the city eerily quiet, and the ledger in her bag heavier than any weight she had ever carried. Clara knew one thing for certain. She had uncovered a secret someone would kill to protect. And the closer she got to the truth, the closer she was to vanishing without a trace. The sun had barely begun its climb when the police received the first report. Clara Bennett was missing. Her apartment showed no signs of forced entry, her car was gone, and her phone had been deactivated or stolen. It was as though she had evaporated into thin air. Detective Laura Summons, assigned to the case, frowned at the sight of Clara's empty apartment. The place was neat, too neat, almost staged. The ledger was missing from her desk, though a notebook lay open, pages filled with frantic notes and highlighted names. "Nothing here indicates a struggle," Laura muttered, flipping through the notebook. "No ransom notes, no signs of theft. Nothing." Her partner, Officer Patel, shook his head. "It's like she disappeared by choice, but with her personality, I doubt that." Across town, Marcus Hayes received the call from Laura, urging him to come in immediately. Panic gripped him. He had feared this moment since Clara first discovered the ledger, but now reality struck. His friend was gone, and the people Clara had been investigating were likely involved. He arrived at her apartment, scanning the room for clues the police might have missed. He noticed small details, a smudge on the windowsill, a faint mud trail leading toward the alley behind the building, and a few coffee stains forming an arrow on the carpet. Nothing overt, but signs only a detective trained in minutia could notice. Marcus knew this wasn't a simple disappearance. Clara hadn't vanished without leaving breadcrumbs. Someone had taken her, and they had done it deliberately, with precision and care. He pulled out his phone and dialed the encrypted number he and Clara used when exchanging sensitive information. No answer, just the voicemail greeting. Marcus's stomach churned. He needed access to Clara's work, her recent interviews, her ledger notes, her encrypted emails. If she had uncovered the truth, it might be his only lifeline. As he scoured her apartment, Marcus noticed a faint smell, something metallic like blood or machinery oil. His pulse quickened. He crouched by the radiator, shining his flashlight across the floor. There, hidden under a loose panel, he found a tiny slip of paper. Written in Clara's hurried handwriting, "They are watching everything. Trust no one. Marcus, follow the ledger." He felt a chill. Clara hadn't left voluntarily. She had left him a warning and a mission. Meanwhile, Clara's world had shifted entirely. She woke in a dim, windowless room, the cold cement floor beneath her hands and knees. The room smelled faintly of damp concrete and machine oil, lit only by a flickering overhead light. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope. Her backpack containing the ledger had been taken. Her first thought was survival, her second, strategy. She observed her surroundings carefully, noting every detail, the sounds of footsteps echoing in the corridor, muffled conversations in an indistinct language, and the pattern of the guards' patrols. Every captor was methodical, arrogant in their assumption that she was powerless. Clara's mind raced. If she could get a message to Marcus, he could uncover the network she had stumbled upon. But how? Her captors were meticulous, yet she noticed small openings, a ventilation shaft just wide enough to hear snippets of conversation, a loose brick near the wall, a floorboard slightly raised in one corner. Back in town, Marcus worked tirelessly. He traced Clara's recent movements, cross-referencing bank statements, security footage from grocery stores, and reports of suspicious vehicles. One pattern stood out: a black SUV seen multiple times near locations Clara had visited. Marcus felt the familiar adrenaline of a chase course through him. He was no longer merely following leads. He was in the center of a dangerous puzzle, each piece carrying life or death consequences. Then came the breakthrough. Clara's encrypted cloud backup showed signs of recent activity. She had managed, somehow, to upload fragments of her research from her phone before it was taken. Marcus pored over the files, coded messages, photographs, and excerpts of ledger entries. They painted a terrifying picture. The people Clara had investigated were not just greedy, they were ruthless, with influence reaching into law enforcement, politics, and organized crime. Every discovery Marcus made was a step deeper into a labyrinth. The deeper he went, the dangerous it became, and he realized one horrifying truth. The people chasing Clara weren't just trying to intimidate, they wanted her gone forever. Meanwhile, Clara took action. Using scraps of rope left frayed and a hairpin from her hair, she loosened her restraints. Her pulse pounded, but her mind remained sharp. She knew the first step was escape. The second step was surviving long enough to signal Marcus. Her captor's arrogance became her ally. During a meal delivery, she observed the guards carefully, but underestimated her focus. When the youngest guard leaned too close to inspect the room, she seized the moment, slicing the ropes and feigning weakness. By the time the guard realized, Clara had slipped into the shadows of the narrow corridor, moving silently, every heartbeat synchronized with her steps. Her escape was narrow. She ducked behind crates, held her breath as heavy boots passed, and memorized every turn. Back at the apartment, Marcus made a risky move. Following a lead from Clara's notes, he drove to the docks late at night, a place Clara often mentioned in cryptic messages. Fog rolled off the river, wrapping the scene in a ghostly white. A lone street lamp illuminated stacks of shipping containers, casting jagged shadows. He stopped, listening, then noticed a faint light flickering in the distance. Could it be Clara? He crept forward, heart racing, only to find a bundle of papers on the ground. He picked them up, pages torn from Clara's notebook, scribbled with hurried warnings, diagrams, and code. "They're here," he whispered to himself, voice low, almost afraid to break the silence. "And she's close." the pieces were coming together. Clara had been taken to a location near the docks, somewhere isolated, somewhere her captors assumed no one would find her. But Marcus had her trail, and he wasn't about to let it go cold. As the night deepened, Clara managed to reach a small service corridor, keeping to shadows. Each step brought her closer to freedom and closer to danger. Somewhere in the darkness, she could hear the low murmur of her captors, their voices threaded with irritation. They hadn't expected her to move so quickly. Marcus, in his car, traced the pattern of lights in the distance with binoculars. A flicker here, a shadow there. He couldn't see her yet, but he knew she was there. Every instinct screamed that time was short, and every move he made could either save her or doom her. And then a gunshot echoed in the night, sharp, unexpected, a warning. Clara froze, pressed herself against the wall. Marcus dropped to the ground, heart hammering. Whoever controlled this network had eyes everywhere. The chase had begun. The stakes were never higher, and for Clara Bennett, one mistake now could mean she would vanish forever, without a trace. Clara's heart pounded like a drum in her chest, echoing through the narrow concrete corridor. The gunshot from earlier still reverberated in her ears. She pressed herself against the cold, damp wall, trying to make herself as small and silent as possible. The hallway was lined with crates, stacked haphazardly, leaving narrow gaps she could slip through. But the guards were close, their boots clicking in deliberate, almost taunting rhythm. She had only one thought: survive and buy time. Each step was calculated. One wrong move, and she would be discovered and likely killed. Somewhere down the corridor, a guard muttered, "Check the far end. She couldn't have gone far." Their voices were laced with irritation and fear. Clara felt a flicker of hope. Fear made them sloppy. She held her breath, counted silently, and darted into a shadowed alcove, squeezing herself behind a stack of crates. She pulled a small piece of scrap paper from her pocket, a code she had prepared in case of emergencies. With a trembling hand, she etched a few characters onto the corner, then folded it carefully and tossed it down a narrow ventilation shaft. Marcus's eyes would catch it. He had the key to decode it. It was a lifeline, fragile but real. Back in town, Marcus had pieced together Clara's trail from the notebook fragments he had found at the docks. The codes, the scribbled diagrams, the references to shipping containers, all pointed to a specific section of the old industrial harbor. His pulse raced as he drove through fog-drenched streets, headlights cutting through the mist. Somewhere in that maze of warehouses, Clara was alive, but time was running out. He stopped at a dark intersection, scanning the containers for movement. A shadow flitted across one of them. Marcus's instinct screamed. He grabbed his binoculars, heart hammering. Yes, there, a glimpse of her silhouette, crouched low. She was moving, trying to stay hidden, trying to survive. Marcus parked, abandoning the car. Every step he took was measured. He couldn't alert her captors or risk scaring her into hiding deeper. He needed to be silent, precise, and ready for confrontation. Inside the warehouse, Clara's mind raced as she observed her captors. They were organized, disciplined, but predictable. They rotated shifts, moved in pairs, and spoke only in short, clipped sentences. She noted everything: the number of guards, the schedule of their patrols, the location of the exits. Each observation was a thread she could follow to plan her escape. Her captors had underestimated her. They believed fear could control her, but Clara had learned long ago that fear was a tool, and sometimes it was a weapon. She waited for the right moment, calculating the odds, timing the guards' movements with a precision that surprised even herself. Finally, the opportunity came. During a shift change, one of the guards left the door ajar, distracted by a call on a secure radio. Clara slipped through the opening, silent as a shadow. She moved quickly but carefully, hugging walls and ducking behind crates. Every heartbeat reminded her of the stakes. One misstep, one sound, and her life would end. Marcus, following the coded message she had sent, arrived at the outer perimeter. He crouched behind stacks of containers, his eyes scanning the complex. The message was clear: exit through the northeast gate, beware the black SUV. He spotted it immediately, a sleek black vehicle parked near the gate, its engine idling, lights dimmed. Clara's captors were expecting her. Marcus swallowed hard, knowing this confrontation could turn deadly. Inside the warehouse, Clara reached a service corridor leading to the northeast exit. Her hands were scraped and bleeding from the rough concrete walls, but she pushed forward, driven by determination and the thought of freedom. She paused at the corner, listening. A guard approached, humming softly, distracted by the thought of the lucrative payment they were about to collect. Clara slipped into a shadow, her chest tight with tension. She reached the door. A cold gust of night air hit her face. Outside, the fog clung to the ground, curling around crates and equipment like restless ghosts. She crouched low, scanning for threats. The black SUV was there, just as Marcus had warned. Her mind raced. How could she distract them long enough to escape? Suddenly, a horn blared from across the dock. Clara froze. The guard shouted, startled, running towards the sound. Timing her move perfectly, she sprinted toward a narrow alley between two shipping containers. Every step brought her closer to freedom and closer to Marcus, who had been silently circling the perimeter. Marcus saw her. Relief and adrenaline surged through him. "Clara!" he whispered urgently, motioning for her to run towards him. She didn't hesitate. She sprinted, heart pounding, towards the only person she trusted in the world. The guards recovered quickly, shouting orders, guns raised. One fired a warning shot. Clara dove behind a container, narrowly avoiding the bullet. Marcus pulled her low, guiding her through a narrow gap that led to a service road. Together, they ran, the fog swallowing them, the night air thick with tension. Once clear of immediate danger, they ducked behind a stack of crates, breathing heavily. Marcus examined her quickly. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. "I'm fine, for now," Clara said, shaking but resolute. "We don't have much time. They'll call in reinforcements." Marcus nodded. "I saw the black SUV. They're organized and they know we're here. We need a plan." Clara pulled out a small map she had memorized from the warehouse's layout. She pointed to a series of service tunnels under the docks. "If we can get through here, we can disappear into the city. They won't find us, not immediately." As they moved cautiously through the tunnels, Clara shared everything she had observed, the captors' routines, the hierarchy, and the network of corruption she had uncovered. Marcus's mind raced, piecing together the scope of what they were dealing with. The organization wasn't just local, it stretched into law enforcement, politics, and corporate power. Exposing it would be dangerous, but necessary. Hours later, they emerged in an abandoned industrial lot miles from the docks. Clara was exhausted, bruised, but alive. Marcus scanned the area, ensuring they weren't being followed. "We need to be smart," he said. "We can't just go to the police. Some of them are involved." Clara nodded. "I know. We have to leak the information carefully. We have proof now, enough to make a difference." Her resolve was unshakable. She had survived, observed, and learned, but she knew the danger wasn't over. The network had eyes everywhere, and escaping once didn't mean they were safe. Marcus looked at her, respect and awe in his eyes. "You were incredible in there," he said quietly. "You stayed calm when most people would have frozen." Clara smiled faintly, though her eyes remained vigilant. "I've been running from shadows my whole life. This one is just bigger than the rest." The two moved silently into the darkness, carrying not just evidence, but a burning determination to bring the truth to light. Behind them, the black SUV waited somewhere in the mist, a reminder that the hunt was far from over. The city slept uneasily, its fog-drenched streets hiding secrets in every shadow. Clara and Marcus moved cautiously, sticking to alleyways and dimly lit streets. Every sound, a distant siren, the hiss of a car engine, footsteps echoing against brick walls, set their nerves on edge. They knew the network wasn't idle. Those who had abducted Clara were already mobilizing, tracking, and hunting them. Clara's backpack contained the ledger, encrypted files, and notes she had memorized during her captivity. The information inside was explosive: financial transactions implicating powerful politicians, corporate executives, and even law enforcement officers. If released, it would shake the nation and topple empires. But first, they had to survive long enough to expose it. Marcus led her to a safe house, a decrepit apartment on the edge of town owned by an old contact from his police days. It was small and sparsely furnished, but it offered cover and, more importantly, anonymity. "Rest," Marcus urged. "We can plan the next step once we know they aren't on us yet." Clara sank onto the couch, muscles aching, mind still racing. She couldn't rest. The image of her captors, their smug confidence, the cold precision of their operations haunted her. She had survived their initial attack, but she knew they wouldn't stop. Some of them were untouchable. Hours later, Marcus spread the ledger's contents across the table. "We need a strategy," he said. "We can't just leak everything at once. We need to make sure it sticks. If we release it improperly, they'll bury it or silence anyone who reports it." Clara nodded. "I've been thinking about that. We can use multiple anonymous channels, independent journalists, encrypted media forums, and secure whistleblower platforms. Each piece must be timed to create pressure and force accountability." Marcus frowned, scanning the data. "And the people we've identified, some of them are dangerous, very dangerous. They won't hesitate to retaliate if they suspect we're behind this." Clara's jaw tightened. "Then we make them afraid, but first we survive." The next morning, Clara and Marcus executed the first phase of their plan. Using a series of burner phones and encrypted networks, they began leaking small but verifiable pieces of the ledger: transactions, shell companies, and emails. Each snippet, corroborated by independent sources, started to appear online. Within hours, whispers became headlines. Investigative journalists picked up the story. Social media exploded with speculation, outrage, and calls for accountability. Clara watched the reaction with a mix of relief and apprehension. It worked, but it had also lit a beacon for their enemies. By evening, their safe house was compromised. Clara noticed a black sedan parked across the street, lights off, engine humming softly. Marcus caught sight of it too. "They're here," he said grimly. "We need to move, now." They slipped out the back, navigating a labyrinth of alleys and abandoned buildings. Every step felt like a calculated risk. The network's reach was vast. They couldn't trust anyone, couldn't linger, couldn't make noise. As they moved, Clara's mind returned to the ledger, the trail of evidence she had painstakingly assembled, and the people who had underestimated her. Every detail mattered. One wrong move, one piece of missing information could allow the network to survive. Marcus led her to a derelict warehouse by the river, a place she had scouted days before. Inside, they set up a secure system to release the final damning evidence. It was meticulous, precise, and exhausting. Clara double-checked every file, every email, and every entry in the ledger. She couldn't afford mistakes. Outside, the night air was tense. Clara noticed movement along the riverbank, figures slipping through the fog, shadows moving with lethal precision. The network had eyes everywhere. She whispered to Marcus, "We have minutes, not hours. Once this goes live, they'll know we're the source." Marcus nodded. "Then let's finish this." The upload was slow, deliberate. Every file that went live was a bombshell. Evidence tied the most influential figures in the city to bribery, murders, and cover-ups. News outlets began reporting on it, their journalists scrambling to verify details. Public outrage surged. Then came the retaliation. The black sedan that had been following them opened fire, bullets ricocheting off metal beams, shattering glass. Clara dove behind a stack of crates, heart racing, pulse screaming in her ears. Marcus returned fire, using his old police training to keep the attackers at bay. "Clara, move!" he shouted, grabbing her arm. Together they sprinted through the warehouse, dodging bullets, using shadows and debris as cover. Every step was life or death. They emerged onto the riverfront, rain beginning to drizzle, slicking the ground. The attackers hesitated at the warehouse entrance, realizing their prey had escaped into the night. Marcus and Clara vanished into the mist, disappearing along the docks, leaving the assailants behind. Hours later, exhausted and soaked, they regrouped in a second safe house. Clara monitored the news. The leaks had created a cascade of arrests, investigations, and resignations. The network was crumbling, but not completely. Some players had vanished, their influence still lurking in the shadows. Marcus looked at her, awe and concern in his eyes. "You did it. You survived, and the truth is out there. People will pay attention now." Clara shook her head slowly. "We've won a battle, not the war. Some of them are untouchable, and they'll be watching us. We can't let our guard down." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything they had endured pressing on them. Clara's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of survival and the enormity of what they had accomplished. In the final moments, Clara stepped to the window, looking out at the city shrouded in fog. Somewhere in the distance, headlights flickered, too distant to be certain, but familiar enough to send a chill down her spine. The threat hadn't ended. The network still had reach, still had eyes, and still had power. Marcus joined her silently. "We'll be ready," he said softly. Clara nodded. "We have to be, because they'll come back, and next time they might not be so careless." The camera, or the imagination of the reader, lingers on the foggy skyline, where shadows move quietly, always watching. The city breathes uneasily, as if aware that the fight for truth is never fully over. And somewhere, in that darkness, the network waits, patient, precise, and lethal. The story ends with chilling suspense. Clara survived, the network was exposed, but the shadows that hunted her still exist. And as the fog rolls through the city streets, the audience is left wondering, will the hunted become the hunted again?